When ECW went under and then WCW was bought by WWE in early 2001, wrestling fans were clamoring at the prospect of an interpromotional storyline based on the Monday Night Wars. Can you imagine The Rock versus Sting? Steve Austin taking on Goldberg? What about Kurt Angle scrapping with Big Papa Pump? They all sound positively tantalizing in theory, but sadly none of them ever happened, due to most of the WCW guys having substantial guaranteed contracts with AOL Time Warner and not wanting to actually work for much less money. How spiteful of them. What the invasion actually turned into was DDP getting his bollocks chopped off, the McMahons using it as a vehicle to prolong their family feud, and Buff Bagwell in his stupid red hat. No, the invasion wasn't half as good as it could have been had the stars properly aligned, but it wasn't all bad either. There were some great moments, like Kurt Angle's Milkamania, Paul Heyman eviscerating Vince McMahon with a scathing work shoot promo, and the old Stone Cold returning to help even the odds against the Alliance. There were also, looking back, some pretty damn fine matches that don't usually come up in conversation, but ought to get a second look now that we're all over how badly WWE bungled the storyline. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 forgotten classics during the WCW WWE invasion. Join us. Number 10, Rob Van Dam vs. Chris Jericho at Unforgiven 2001. Though the invasion was a disappointment overall, there were one or two big successes coming out of it. Perhaps nobody came out of the invasion looking better than Rob Van Dam, the laid-back extremist that captured the hearts and minds of WWE fans and went on a tremendous run as hardcore champion. With RVD holding the ramshackle strap, hardcore matches became a lot more than bin-lid smacking filler and were actual spectacles well worth watching. One of the best was the whole effing show's defense against Chris Jericho at Unforgiven, which started off as a nice wrestling match full of smooth sequences and actually took a while for the weapons to be introduced. And when they were, they didn't overdo it, employing a single ladder and steel chair and building the spots up as the action escalated. Y2J's Walls of Jericho on the top of the ladder was an awesome sight, as was the teeth-rattling Van Daminator. The Alliance man got the win thanks to a timely distraction from a certain filthy, dirty, disgusting, brutal, skanky, bottom-feeding trash bag ho. One of WWE's better hardcore matches ever, this was a great showcase for two performers who were on the rise and nobody could stop. Or could they? Number 9, Booker T vs. Kurt Angle on Raw. One thing that sticks out from the matches of this era is just how insanely hot those Attitude Era crowds were. So while a match might not be a 5-star masterpiece, a good match can seem like a great one, and a great one like an all-timer based on how much the fans are losing their minds. As was the case with the WCW title match between Kurt Angle and Booker T from the July 30th, 2001 episode of Raw. The two had a few really solid matches against one another during the invasion, but this one was the best. It started with the Alliance attacking the Olympian before the bell and Rhino hitting him with a gore on the floor, prompting the WWE crew to intervene and a mass brawl breaking out. Booker seized control for most of the contest before Angle rallied with his suplexes and an angle slam, setting up the ankle lock. He looked like retaining the gold before Shane O'Mac provided a distraction and Austin ran in, resulting in a ref bump. There was a cracking kick out with Angle getting his shoulder up after the axe kick, but another ref bump followed by the stunner was enough to make Booker a five-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion. Suckers. Number 8, Winner Take All at Survivor Series 2001. A storyline which easily could have lasted a year came to an end after a measly 5 months, but at least it went out with a bang. It all came down to Survivor Series and the winner-take-all main event, where the winning side got to remain in business and the losers had to dissolve. Now, there was literally zero chance that WWE weren't triumphing on the night, but the 5-on-5 traditional Survivor Series rules tag match was good and planted at least a seed of doubt for a fleeting moment. In it, Team WWE, The Rock, Chris Jericho, Undertaker, Kane, and Big Show took on Team Alliance, Steve Austin, Booker T, Kurt Angle, Rob Van Dam, and Shane McMahon. The bout was a good 45 minutes long, and everyone got an opportunity to shine before the eliminations kicked in, and it got down to 2 versus 2, and then finally 1 versus 1. I'm sure nobody thought a WCW and ECW invasion of WWE was going to be settled with the Texas Rattlesnake and Brahma Bull fighting over the respective companies, but it was what it was, and it was Austin versus The Rock, so who the hell are you to complain? The Great One got the win after plenty of shenanigans and a Kurt Angle turn, Vince McMahon celebrating the victory like he'd just been acquitted by the federal government. Number 7, Rob Van Dam versus Steve Austin versus Kurt Angle at No Mercy 2001. By October, Rob Van Dam had become so popular that he was inserted into the WWE title picture and added to the main event of No Mercy, challenging for Stone Cold Steve Austin's championship in a match also featuring Kurt Angle. I'm sure RVD was positively ecstatic with his promotion. Actually, I bet when he was told, he was all like, sounds cool dude, whatever, and then lit up one of those funny cigarettes of his. The storyline leading into the match was compelling, with Van Dam and Austin ostensibly on the same side but butting heads and being manipulated by other members of the alliance as well as Vince McMahon. The match was all action and a really unique clash of styles, as Austin's brawling meshed surprisingly well with Van Dam's high-flying martial arts and Kurt Angle's explosive suplexes and submissions. Mr. Pay-Per-View hit a big somersault dive to the floor, Angle successfully nailed his beautiful moonsault, and the bionic redneck did a lot of punching people in the mouth. Stick to what you know, says I. The match was going great, and then Vince and Shane got involved, which ended with father tackling son over the announce desk and pummeling him in the face for old time's sake. In the end, Austin hit Van Dam with a stunner and barely escaped with the gold. Number 6, Booker T vs. The Rock at SummerSlam 2001. Following his loss to Steve Austin on the post-WrestleMania X7 episode of Raw, The Rock took a little break from WWE to try and go and conquer Hollywood and become a huge movie star or something. I think it turned out alright for him. His presence was missed, and once filming on the Scorpion King had wrapped, his return to WWE television was a most welcome one. The People's Champion deliberated over which side he was going to choose, but ultimately that man's heart pumps WWE blood, and refreshing Terramana tequila available online and in select stores. One of his first big matches back was the SummerSlam main event, a WCW World Heavyweight title showdown with Booker T. Like Van Dam, Booker T was one of the only Alliance wrestlers to come out of the angle looking good, and he demonstrated his main event pedigree against the most electrifying man in sports entertainment. A great high-energy seesaw battle, The Rock vs. Booker T at SummerSlam 2001 was a worthy headliner for one of the biggest shows of the year and was stuffed with believable near falls and just the right amount of garnish with Shane McMahon and the APA's interference. Rock won it with his own version of the bookend. Number 5, Steve Austin vs. The Rock at Rebellion 2001. If I'm being kind, I'll say that WWE's previous UK pay-per-view efforts have been inconsistent. If I'm not being kind, I'll say that WWE's previous UK pay-per-view efforts have been rubbish, sub-house show level affairs where it's plainly clear that the company don't consider them important. Glad I got that off my chest. Rebellion 2001 was different though, because while there was some of the expected fluff, there was also some really good stuff on it too, including a WCW title match between Chris Jericho and Kurt Angle, and a main event worthy of WrestleMania itself. Now, the Rock vs. Austin WWE title match was obviously not up to the ridiculously high standard of Mania X7 or anything like that, but it was a worthy entry into their epic series and one of the better matches of the invasion. I'll take Austin and Rock duking it out on pay-per-view even if they are jet-lagged and going at half speed, but if they were suffering any tiredness from their transatlantic flight, they weren't showing it here because they tore the flipping house down. And then they built the house back up and decided to tear it down once more, going hell for leather for 20 plus minutes. Austin once again eked it thanks to a little outside help. Number 4, Chris Jericho and The Rock vs. Kurt Angle and Steve Austin on SmackDown. 12 days after Rebellion, the two featured matches collided in the blockbuster main event of the November 15th, 2001 edition of SmackDown. Obviously, by this point, the whole WWE vs. WCW and ECW aspect had been watered down more than a college girl during spring break, and Jericho, Rock, Austin, and Angle were all established WWE performers. But a good match is a good match, and this served its purpose on the go-home show before Survivor Series and the winner-take-all match. It began with Austin and Rock trading punches, and the pace didn't ease up for the rest of the match, from Jericho being isolated and worked over to the hot tag to The Rock. The bout ended in a DQ when Angle and Austin introduced a steel chair, and as good as the match itself is, the post-match scene is just as good, if not better. One after another, everyone involved in the winner-take-all match showed up and it descended into a full-on finisher fest. The work in the match is as good as you would expect considering the star power and who was involved, and the aftermath was a great way to build to the pay-per-view. Number 3, Rob Van Dam vs. Jeff Hardy at Invasion 2001. The Invasion pay-per-view was a huge financial success, but critically, it didn't get quite so much love. Bouts Bouts like Nick Patrick versus Earl Hebner and Raven against William Regal were not exactly what fans wanted to see on a card comprised of WWE, ECW, and WCW wrestlers. The inaugural Brawl main event was solid, but the true highlight was the hardcore title bout between Jeff Hardy and Rob Van Dam. Seizing the spotlight and stealing the event, the whole effing show and the charismatic Enigma let it all hang out in another hardcore bout that wasn't simply about them clattering each other with baking trays and other debris, but using the environment and one or two select weapons to accentuate the action. There was a bit of high flying, some brawling through the crowd, and a ladder and a chair were brought into play. In perhaps the most breathtaking moment of the contest, Jeff went through a gap in the entrance stage after being hit with a Van Daminator, the camera work making it look as though he had disappeared off the face of the earth. A perfect first impression for many WWE fans who wouldn't have been too familiar with him, Van Dam capped off a near flawless performance by pinning Hardy and capturing the title. Number 2, Steve Austin vs. Kurt Angle at SummerSlam 2001. Another banger that may have gotten lost in the shuffle in the 20 years since it took place, Steve Austin and Kurt Angle's WWE title match from SummerSlam 2001 may not have gone on last, but it was the best match of a very good show. After vying for Vince McMahon's affections for most of the summer and fanning about with guitars and tiny cowboy hats, Austin and Angle got serious for their big pay-per-view showdown. Stone Cold's heel run isn't fondly remembered by a lot of people, but he was really feeling it here and played the opportunistic coward to perfection, resorting to cheap tricks like eye pokes and trying to get a win via countout when things weren't going his way. Angle, for his part, was in wrestling machine mode, still new to the business, but every bit a polished all-rounder. He got busted open, but fought on, consistently going for the ankle lock and hitting some suplexes on the floor, as well as a huge moonsault. Then came the finisher kickouts, and when he knew he couldn't win in a fair fight, Austin took out not one, not two, but 3 WWE referees, forcing evil referee Nick Patrick to call for the DQ and save the Alliance leader's title. Number 1, The Rock vs. Chris Jericho at No Mercy 2001. While much of the invasion centered around WWE guys battling members of the Alliance, occasionally some infighting would result in a match between 2 members of the same side. And listen, I love all of those interpromotional dream matches, you know, the likes of Billy Gunn versus Shawn Stasiak or Chronic against Kai and Tai. But the WCW title match between Chris Jericho and The Rock blew them all out of the water. We know that The Rock is great, and we know that Jericho is great too, and letting them run wild for 25 minutes in a major title match on a pay-per-view is what I believe the smart fans call good booking. They made every minute count and took fans on a roller coaster that ebbed and flowed wonderfully, with the live crowd torn on who they wanted to see prevail. After a big announce table bump and some finisher trading, Stephanie McMahon made her way down to ringside and slid in a chair. She ended up tasting a rock bottom for her meddling, but her steel assist proved pivotal as Y2J dropped Rock with a breakdown, remember that move, on it for the win. A huge moment for Jericho. Perhaps it was this outing that convinced Vince McMahon he could be undisputed champion.